Welcome again, my friends, to the story of Mu, and we're now on part 3. It begins with Feathered Trumpet, one who proclaims himself as a gifted leader. Keymyu, her grandmother, Laughing Wolf, and Steady Turtle were all greeted by the bird of many colors with a trumpeting call. They followed it into the jungle as Wolf and Turtle cut away the heavy underbrush. There they found pools of clear water and plants with colorful flowers, berries, and other edible things. It was not long before they met others who had wandered into this jungle. Many spoke the traditional tongue of Mu from the mainland. Only a few knew how to communicate through thoughts. When Keymyu and her grandmother kept quiet most of the time, the other people thought of them as backward, and thus did not mind when the old woman and child chose to live outside the community in a private dwelling. Laughing Wolf and Steady Turtle did most of the hunting, trading, and communicating for them. Therefore, no one really knew the names of this strange old woman and young girl who never spoke. Many stars thought it wise to keep her granddaughter separate from those who were beginning to follow the one who called himself Feathered Trumpet. That was the name many had first given the multicolored bird that led them to the crystal pools. Since the people held this bird in reverence for leading them to food and water, the one who had ordained himself as leader decided to take the name of Feathered Trumpet for himself. If truth were told, most of the people let Feathered Trumpet take over because they were afraid of him. He had a temper that thundered loudly and suddenly like a rainstorm, and he was a better hunter and more skilled with a knife than most of them. So to challenge Feathered Trumpet would have meant a certain death to the challenger. Keymyu felt that Feathered Trumpet's ways were against the ancient teachings she had learned during the dream state on the journey across the great water. Her grandmother said into her thoughts, "Better to be invisible like the wind than crushed like an ant." So she only told her grandmother about the ancient teachings and let the other people learn what they needed to learn by following the self-appointed one. According to the ancient ways, a natural leader was never self-appointed. To do so meant false pride, a quality which a natural leader should not have. It was the people who chose the leader by observing who would do the highest good for all involved. A natural leader would express ideas to guide the people rather than force them to do anything. A natural leader used his skills in hunting, reasoning, and creating things so that all gained from them. He would not accumulate wealth, status, or possessions unto himself, but would make sure a natural balance and harmony came about in dividing the food, clothing, tools, chores, and so forth. When a certain project was needed to be done, which was the good for the whole community, the people gladly participated because a good leader praised, encouraged, and honored all for their unique way of contributing. Feathered Trumpet seemed to lead with the opposite approach. He ordered things to be done with threats of punishment if they were not done. Thus, when he commanded that a large pile of rock and dirt be built, which would eventually tower above the forest, the people begrudgingly did the task. He would say, "It will allow us to be closer to the sky and maker of all things." But the people really knew that he was building it to keep a lookout for any enemy who might want to take away his possessions or leadership. Each day, Feathered Trumpet would take food or precious items and place them at the top of the great mound as an offering to the Creator. By doing so, he told the people, this would keep them safe and protected. However, when the rainy season came, an unknown sickness began killing the people. The people would argue, if you have the powers you say you have, then you should be able to stop this sickness. But more and more people began to die every day. Feathered Trumpet was at a loss in knowing what to do. All he could think of was, we need a great sacrifice to Maker of all things. So he told the people, I will go and pray and fast and come back with an answer. After 3 days and 3 nights of prayer and fasting, Feathered Trumpet still had no answer. However, while wandering back to the village, he caught sight of someone walking in a direction where he knew there was no path. I wonder where that person is going, he thought. Keymyu was on her daily journey to where she had hidden the sacred feathers. She would pray with them and surround them with a smoke of burning sweetgrass as she asked for protection for her family and for Wolf and Turtle. Feathered Trumpet could not see clearly what she was taking from behind a rock because her body blocked his view. After this young girl had left the area, he went to the rock where she had been and moved it to one side. His heart laughed with joy and delight as he recognized the sacred feathers that Sacred One had taken with him to an unknown island with a group of people. Ever since that day, the mainland of Mu had suffered terrible chaos. The people had fights and accidents, and many died or lost their faith. But now that he, Feathered Trumpet, had this sacred feather and treasure, all good things would return to the people, and the unknown sickness would end in this new land, he assured himself. He would have to find out who that young girl was, and perhaps use her when they gave a sacrifice to the powers that be. Yes, that was it, he reasoned. One of their own people would be the greatest sacrifice they had ever made. A sacrifice, plus the sacred feathers, will surely turn things in my favor, he decided. Besides, since the young girl is probably the only one who knows about the feathers, then she must be eliminated so that all believe that the feathers came to him during the 3 days of fasting and praying. Only for a moment did he wonder how this young girl got the sacred feathers, and then dismissed the thought, reasoning that she probably had no idea what she had. How would a young girl know of such things? And if Sacred One were still alive, he would have the feathers himself. Wait until I show these to Raven, he thought. She has always been interested in things of power. That is why she chose me, the one who took power over the people. She will have to show me much pleasure to touch these. With these final thoughts, Feathered Trumpet returned home, feeling proud and triumphant. And now we come to Raven. In her native tongue, her name meant one who uses power for their own gain. And the story goes like this. When Feathered Trumpet placed the sacred feathers on the bed before her, Raven didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She looked down at the scar on her hand, which she received the last time she laid eyes on these very feathers. Her thoughts went back to a time when Sacred One had danced with both her and Sparkling Water at the summer feast. It had been rumored that Sacred One would choose to teach 2 people who had shown the natural ability for healing Raven knew that both she and Sparkling Water had helped people who came to them with ailments. This was well known in the village. At the end of the feast, the Sacred One asked both Raven and Sparkling Water to come to his cave for teaching. Raven agreed to go, but went not for the teachings. She went to beguile the Sacred One into moments of pleasure. She was well skilled in capturing men's hearts, who would then possessively do anything in order to keep her. All day she tried to take Sacred One's mind off the teachings. She could learn that all later, she thought to herself. But all her efforts failed, and she left in a huff at sundown. The next day, Raven followed Sparkling Water to the cave. This one knows nothing of pleasure, Raven thought. She is a woman with a girl's innocence. Everyone knows that she's been seeing Sunwalker for over 6 moons, and they do not even touch each other. Surely, this one will not gain Sacred One's favor. The following day, Sacred One visited the place where women washed clothing. He placed the feathers between Raven and Sparkling Water. "Let us see who the feathers choose," Sacred One said. Sparkling Water moved back away from the sacred feathers. She did not understand. Had the Sacred One not said that these feathers should never be on the ground, and that if anyone touched them, other than a rightful heir, that they would bring harm to not only that person but their family? Raven laughed at what she interpreted as Sparkling Water's cowardice. "I'm not afraid of these feathers," she said. "I'm a healer with great power myself, and therefore would be a natural heir to hold these and use them." But as she reached her hand down to pick the feathers up, a circle of fire surrounded them and burnt Raven's hand. She quickly withdrew her hand and covered it with the garment she had been washing. "The feathers have chosen," said Sacred One, as he picked them up and took Sparkling Water by the hand, leading her away. All Raven knew after that was that Sparkling Water had spent the evening with Sacred One, and within a few days, Sparkling Water and Sunwalker were wed, to everyone's surprise. Shortly thereafter, the Sacred One and a group of people disappeared from the mainland of Mu. There were so many islands around the mainland that it would have taken 10 times 10 full cycles of the moon to find them. Raven also knew Feathered Trumpet during this time, but he was called Led by the Storms in those days. Who would have imagined that this young man with a stormy disposition would one day command the people? And that's exactly what he did, she thought. He commanded the people to do things. He did not lead them, nor did they follow of their own free will. How different he was from Sacred One. But none of this matters, she reasoned. I will eventually win the people's trust over by my abilities to heal and see people's fear. As well, they are becoming dependent on the potion I have created, which is drunk at every meal. It is this very potion which has dulled the minds so that Feathered Trumpet can rule over them. She glanced down again at the scar on her hand and the sacred feathers before her. She was not sure she wanted to touch these feathers right now. She needed time to prepare. So she simply replied to Feathered Trumpet by saying, "I am hungry. Let's go and eat." And she walked out of the dwelling. This action confused Feathered Trumpet. But then he reasoned how clever this woman is to pretend that she's not interested in these powerful feathers. He called a guard and told him to go and get the young girl who lived in the only dwelling outside the village. She was going to be honored as part of a great ceremony which would bring health back to the people. But the guard knew the real intention of gathering this girl, for he had overheard Raven and Feathered Trumpet talking about a human sacrifice being needed to appease the powers that be. He himself had never heard of a human sacrifice before, but who was he to understand the power of magic? So he did as he was told and went to get the young girl who never spoke. So now we will hear the perspective of Many Stars. And in her native tongue, her name meant one who communes with the ancestors. Many Stars squawked out words of protest from a mouth and throat which rarely spoke. She and her granddaughter understood each other perfectly without the need for words. Thus they rarely talked out loud. Immediately upon the arrival of the guard, Many Stars discerned from his heart that the so-called sacred ceremony, which was supposed to honor her granddaughter, would actually bring danger to Keymyu. Both Laughing Wolf and Steady Turtle were away on a hunting trip that day. No one had bothered their private dwelling before, so why would this guard want to take Keymyu away now? Keymyu vaguely saw the picture of something long and tall in the guard's mind as she struggled to release herself and run to the safety of her grandmother's arms. But the guard held fast and jerked her away from the doorway and out down the path back to the village. Keymyu suddenly understood what she was seeing in the guard's mind: the feathers. She projected these thoughts back to her grandmother. "Grandmother, go see if the feathers are still in their hiding place." Her grandmother choked in horror and quickly ran down the path to where the sacred feathers were hidden. Seeing that they were gone, she decided to follow the guard and her granddaughter. All the way there, she put out a distress call mentally to Wolf and Turtle. "Great Spirit, please alert anyone who can help us." Many Stars followed the guard to a tent-like dwelling. As she peeked through the slit on the jungle side of the tent, she saw a beautiful woman with long, dark, black hair, stirring some kind of liquid, and then force her granddaughter to drink it. It was all Many Stars could do to keep from screaming out, but the strong guard was also there, and she had no one to help her rescue her granddaughter. Many Stars made sure that no one saw her as various people walked in and out of the tent, bathing, dressing, and preparing Keymyu for some sort of ceremony. Tears filled her eyes as she watched her granddaughter's head droop. Obviously, she had been given something so that she would not protest or run away. When the final time came to take Keymyu to the tall mound of rock and dirt, Many Stars searched the crowd to see if she knew anyone who could help her. But the people's eyes were glazed over, and even when Many Stars recognized people, they did not recognize her in return, but kept mumbling something about a sacrifice to restore the health of the people. As Keymyu was led up the steep steps, she almost fell backwards. Many Stars pressed forward to help her granddaughter's rescue, but that guard at the base of the mound stopped her. "This cannot be happening," Many Stars cried within herself. "This terrible day could not be the destiny of our people. Great ancestors, Please help me. So in part 3, we've gained some more pieces of the puzzle. We've been able to see how Feathered Trumpet sees life, how Raven sees life, and finally how Keymyu's grandmother, Many Stars, sees life. She's called upon the ancestors to help them rescue the feathers and help her people and her family. So in part 4, we will continue with Many Stars' perspective, and we will find out if Keymyu is rescued or not. We will also learn what secrets Many Stars reveals about her family's past and how was Sacred One involved. As the story continues, it shows how understanding another person's perspective can help heal relationships. So we hope you continue into part 4 about this story of Mu. Thank you for leaving thoughtful comments and observations in the comment section below. And also for those of you who pass a link of this story on to friends who might enjoy it. So, until next time, blessings and peace. Namaste.